Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be talking about the path to a Democratic Senate majority in 2026, and I'll be looking at the path for Democrats to reclaim the Senate, and I'll be detailing, as a result, why it's going to be so difficult for them. So, again, I think this video is going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to, show the easiest path for Democrats to win 51 Senate seats. That will be difficult for them. It's not likely that this path happens, and that's mostly because Democrats lost a Senate race in Pennsylvania by just a couple thousand votes last year. But going forward, I think Democrats have a reasonable chance of winning the Senate back potentially in 2028. But for this video, what would happen? What would it look like if they were able to win it back in 2026? Let's find out. So I'm going to begin by filling out the states that would be safe or likely. These are seats that Democrats absolutely have to have in any a Senate election, whether it's a good night for them or a bad night for them. But I'm also going to recognize that there are probably a number of GOP-held Senate seats that are going to be, fairly clearly on the red side. And as you can see, barring a miracle for Democrats in Kansas or Texas or Andy Beshear running a brilliant campaign in Kentucky, Republicans have 49 Senate seats that I think they are pretty safe in having won. Now, that doesn't mean that the Republicans are going to win a huge majority, even on a good night for them in 2026. But I do think what can kind of be seen here is that there are a number of ways in which the Democrats can have a good night and still not come out with a big Senate majority. The ceiling for them is a lot smaller. And so to kind of look at this math, the path to 51, as you can see, the path to 51 involves just winning the rest of these seats. It's basically winning any seat that they have a greater than 5% chance of winning. And I think that all the red states or states where Republicans have a 95% chance of winning, if not greater. And then these gray states, the ones that have left outstanding, are somewhere in the competitive column, some more so than others. So I think the first ones Democrats should win are Michigan and Georgia. These are seats they currently hold. In Georgia, they have an incumbent in Jon Ossoff. I think he could certainly win. Whether it's against Brian Kemp or not, the race is still competitive. In Michigan, we have obviously a race between potentially Mike Rogers on the Republican side, and whether it's Pete Buttigieg or Dana Nessel or Mallory McMorrow even for the Democrats, we don't know. But again, Michigan Democrats have had good luck here in recent midterm elections. I think this is definitely winnable for them. And then you kind of get into the toss-up or, Republican-leaning seats. I think the first off the board would be North Carolina. I'm going to kind of label that in a lighter shade here. North Carolina is certainly one that's going to be on the Democratic flip list. I think this is their easiest potential pickup by a lot. Tom Tillis is the incumbent Republican senator. He's not unpopular, but he's not entrenched. He's not super popular. He only won by about 1.5 points last time. And Democrats are hoping to run Roy Cooper, who is the current governor of North Carolina, who is quite popular. He's kind of the Democratic Brian Kemp, I would say. And so again, when you take a look at how this race has the potential to unfold, it's pretty clear right now the Democrats have a path here with Roy Cooper, who is again a popular governor running against a replacement level Republican senator. So the next seat obviously is Maine. Now Maine is tricky because on paper Democrats should have a very good chance here. It's a blue state. It likes Democrats in seemingly every election except for this one Senate seat. And Susan Collins, though she won in 2020, is running in what could be a Democratic-leaning midterm year, and she's not super popular. On paper, her approval ratings are not that good. She isn't like an Andy Beshear figure where, sure, it's a Republican in a blue state, but that Republican is a really well-liked figure personally. Collins, by any objective measure, is not popular. The only thing that is popular about her is the fact that she keeps winning, which is so interesting. So, again, in Maine, Democrats, to win the Senate, they have to win this seat back. I don't think they're favored to do that. I think it's definitely possible, but for now, to me, it seems as though this Senate seat is one Democrats are going to have no matter what, regardless of whether or not they win the Senate majority. So 49-49, I think these are some realistic pickups for Democrats. Now, here's where it gets tricky. They would need to win Alaska and Ohio. And these are both states that went for Donald Trump by around 11% in 2024. So just to talk about how these states voted relative to the national environment, if they're both around R+11, they were about 9.5% to the right of the country. So all else equal, you would have to have around a D plus 9.5 national environment to get these seats to be even. So D plus 9.6. Democrats have to win the popular vote by a point more than they wanted by in 2018 to win these Senate seats. And so that's probably not going to happen. Democrats might have a really good year, but I don't think they're going to win the popular vote by 9.5. And so if we assume it's more of a D plus 5 environment, which again, this would still be quite good for Democrats, I still think that's an environment they could win North Carolina and Maine in fairly easily, right? Democrats have to make up the 4 to 5 point, gap that you'd expect a generic Republican versus a generic Democrat to result in with candidate quality. So they would need a really good candidate on their side or a really bad candidate on the Republican side. In Alaska, that's not going to happen because Dan Sullivan is the incumbent Republican senator and he's running for re-election. And Sullivan, I don't think, is a huge overperformer, but he did reasonably well in 2020 against a decent, Democrat/independent back candidate. So he's certainly not bad enough to lose a Senate race on his own. And in Ohio, we don't know who the Republicans are going to run, but it's likely not going to be someone actually as bad as Moreno, who won the Senate race in 2024. Now, Moreno obviously ran in a presidential year with Trump's coattails in a red environment. So again, keep that all in mind. He didn't do all that well, all things considered. But I think in terms of just raw candidate, Republicans are going to be fine here. So what has to happen is Democrats have to find a really good candidate. And the good news is they have people who can run. In Alaska, it would be Mary Peltola. And in Ohio, it would be Sherrod Brown. The problem is that recognizing the Republican nature of these two states, Democrats, have a bit of an issue, I should say, with getting these people to run. Mary Peltola is obviously the former representative from Alaska. She served one term, a little more than one term because she won a special election in 2022. And she's popular. She has good approval ratings across the state of Alaska. The issue is that she lost narrowly in 2024, and she's now likely to run for governor. So the path for Democrats to win this Alaska Senate race would be to convince Peltola to run for Senate, and she'd have to run a really good campaign. And you'd have to hope that the national environment is close to D plus 6, D plus 7, D plus 8. Because if not, this race is not winnable for them. So that would be the next, to me, the 50th seat would be Alaska before Ohio. Just because Alaska is small, it's idiosyncratic, and I think there's a wider range of outcomes. Ohio's the 51st seat. Ohio would be the Senate majority. And to win in Ohio, Democrats would have to convince Sherrod Brown to run, or maybe Tim Ryan, but I think Sherrod Brown is clearly the stronger candidate. Now, Sherrod Brown, I think is a very strong candidate. And to me, it might seem ironic or kind of, weird, but I think that I came out of 2024's election having more faith in Sherrod Brown as a candidate than I did before. Sherrod Brown outran Kamala Harris by 8% in 2024. And that was with a Republican challenger that was not that great, but was well-funded, and that Republicans had really backed. In 2018, Sherrod Brown outran Richard Cordray by 11.5. Cordray was the Democratic candidate for governor, but Brown did that while Republicans actually tried in the governor's race and had given up on Sherrod Brown's Senate opponent. So yes, Sherrod Brown outran the top of the ticket, or the next closest person, by a bit less in 2024 relative to 2018. But he did it in 2024 in a more polarized environment, in a presidential year with Trump on the ticket, and against an opponent who had a lot more institutional support from the GOP. So Sherrod Brown is not the concern for Ohio Democrats. The concern for Ohio Democrats is that Republicans are probably going to find a decent candidate to run here. I don't know who that will be. I think at this point the only Republican bad enough to make this race a pure toss-up against Sherrod Brown would be Vivek Ramaswamy, but Ramaswamy's indicated he's likely to run for governor, not for Senate. And so in that way, Republicans are going to dodge a bullet. And so that's why I think this race is hard for Democrats, because Sherrod Brown could run a great campaign. The national environment could be great, but would that be enough to overcome a deficit of, 9.5% to the right of the country and potentially trending even more conservative? I don't know. So the path here is assuming Republicans run a half-decent candidate. Brown will have to run the campaign of his life. And he's at the tail end of his political career. I don't even know if he's going to run. I think it's a pure toss-up if he does run or not. But that would be the path. So beyond, North Carolina and Maine, and then holding on Michigan and Georgia, which is no easy feat, Democrats have a really hard time here. This is their best case scenario, I think, without a shadow of a doubt. Again, we've talked about potentially a miracle in Kansas or Kentucky with Democratic governors running there. Texas, I think, had it been closer in 2020, could have been on the board, or closer in 2024, could have been on the board. But again, Kamala Harris just lost it by 14, so it's certainly looking as if it's not going to be blue anytime soon. And Florida has, I think, been off the board for, really since 2022 now. And so that leaves Democrats with, very limited options. But I think this is what happens when you have a coalition that is not, not really appealing to voters in states like Ohio, in states like Iowa, in states like Kentucky. And I know Democrats, everyone says this, Democrats have to find a way to win back these voters. And I think that's easier said than done. And a lot of this is not the fault of the Democratic Party. But the coalition shift, which has in some ways helped the Democrats, has hurt them in the Senate, where you have one state gets the same number of senators, or every state gets the same number of senators. So this is a question that is very fundamental to the Democratic Party, and it remains to be seen if they can overcome it. So that is a question that we'll be grappling with on this channel for, the next, 1-2 years as we get close to 2026. So on that note, let me know what you want to see next. I'll talk about this for the Republicans, certainly, their path to 50 or 51 even. It's a lot easier than that of the Democrats, that's for sure. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.